I'm Jeff Elder. Welcome to the second in a series of monthly podcasts about fostering innovation here in Charlotte. Tonight we'll be talking about the nature of the new workspace, about sharing office space, about cobbling together careers, and whether Charlotte, as a traditional New South city with a traditional workforce, is helping that to occur. I'd like to introduce the panel. On my right, we have Carlos Espin, who's one of the owners of the space where we are tonight, Area 15. Next to him, Rich Deming of Calor Energy, who's helped foster several startups here in Charlotte. To my left, Chris Beck of NetPhase, who has started up companies and helped new companies and smaller companies in this new workspace. And Tyler Ford, who has started Lightbulb Co-working, a new space in historic South End. Tyler, why don't we start with you? Tell us why you started a new kind of office space just in November and how that's going so far.
We stumbled into it, to be honest. The goal was to get an office and let other people pay for it. And then we discovered and started to do some research and some initial fact finding that there was a movement out there called co-working, to the point that it's basically a formal term now. With some incredible web resources. It's become a really comprehensive nationwide and even global movement. So we kind of latched onto that and just saw the idea, saw that we could make it a little bit more of a formal idea than just running out and getting an office space and subletting it, but that we could kind of work within this framework of what some other people had already done. So we went into it with kind of an open mind, but with a real entrepreneurial attitude. Being a down economy, I guess it's kind of my nature to look for the opportunity instead of the downside. So we knew real estate would be cheap, and so we've got incredible rates as far as lease rates and things like that. And in addition to that, our membership so far is made up of a lot of people who didn't have jobs a year ago. So as opposed to looking at a down economy and not being able to fill a space, it's kind of been exactly opposite. We have freelancers who worked at design firms last year, or SEO people who worked at a web firm last year, and so now they've struck out on their own and they were looking for space. So it all kind of just came together real naturally.
Carlos Espin, you also have a new kind of space in Charlotte, maybe a little less specifically work-oriented than what Tyler's doing. What can you tell us about Area 15, how it's developed, and where it is now?
I like to think of it as bringing creative people together. So a little different approach, not so much just tech-based, but just different types of creative people together. So that's one of my passions. That's really what it's all about here.
And this has been a different sort of assortment of tenants and uses. What's the reception been in Charlotte? Do people sort of scratch their heads and say, what is that over there at Area 15, or have you found it to be pretty welcoming?
Well, we don't really concern ourselves a whole lot with that, and that's probably one of our strengths, is we just try to be ourselves and be creative and let the rest take care of itself.
Very good. Rich Deming, you have helped to start several small companies here. How is that right now in Charlotte? We tend to think of this as being a city of big banks and NASCAR and Duke Energy, but you've sort of been at the other end of the spectrum. Has it been hard to get traction with that in Charlotte?
No, I wouldn't say it's hard to get traction. I mean, if you're looking for space, this kind of environment is probably better because there's a lot of open space in this town at this point. If you're a little bit creative in what you'll take, if you have a little bit of tolerance for non-standard spaces, there's all kinds of places in this town that you can get for pretty cheap.
Interesting. Give us a tip. I mean, is there one around town that you would pounce on if you could?
Well, Carlos has got some great space here that you can get a phenomenal space for $600 a month or something. I mean, if you're starting a company, you can't beat that. Right up the street, I started a biofuels company and found a little warehouse. It looks like a dump. We called it early condemned. $800 for 2,000 square feet of industrially zoned space. I mean, there's a lot of cities out there that you couldn't do that.
And Tyler Ford, how much does it cost to get office space and Lightbulb Co-working?
We have a tiered system all the way from folks who need an office to call home, to set up shop, put pictures of the kids up, that kind of thing, which is $250 a month. And then we tier it down to more of a workstation vibe, which is more for the person who just wants to get out of the home office or maybe out of a Starbucks table. So they have a real generous workspace, but not a big office or storage or that kind of thing, more laptop driven, which are either $150 a month for 24/7 access or $75 a month just to be able to come in during business hours.
Chris Beck of NetPhase, you've been a tenant in some of these situations as you've launched NetPhase and bring in different companies to work with, different clients to work with. Do you sort of scout that landscape and say, where can we get in here with our clients to do our business now?
Well, I don't know that I'd necessarily say we've been a tenant, but we've been a wannabe tenant in a few of these places on several occasions, even going so far as to explore all the your office type shared workspaces, with the receptionists and everything else like that, where they want to charge you a fair amount of money. I mean, $800 and up for a really small office and maybe a virtual receptionist, somebody to answer your phones, a real person, or, collect your mail or something like that, down to, just going to coffee shops and trying to hold meetings in coffee shops, which is really interesting if you're bringing clients in from out of town. It wasn't until I heard about Lightbulb that we started to see, hey, there are other alternatives, because, we had been to Area 15 before, and, for conferences, bar camps and things like that, but I guess had not made that mental leap that, you can run a technology company out of here. You can have some interesting meeting spaces. You can have a bigger space if you need to hold a conference, like a bar camp, which we've seen and done. But, kudos for Lightbulb to step up and actually provide a space in that market that was really missing for a long time.
And Carlos Espen, here at Area 15, there's really an eclectic assortment of folks. There's a worship space, 24-hour worship space next door. There are different artists. Does that help sort of create an atmosphere of innovation so that people coming in here think, this is not business as usual, we can sort of spread our wings here and do something different?
Yeah, my philosophy is that we bring together individual people who are all different and unique, and I want them to stay who they are and be creative individuals and bring them together, align different people, makes for creativity. So we do have like 16, I think, different leaders right now, different businesses, 4 nonprofits in the building.
Very good. Rich Deming, let me put you in the role of a mentor to a fictitious startup that's looking for a home, that's looking for funding, that's looking for guidance. What do you tell a startup like that that's really trying to get going in Charlotte? Maybe hard knock lessons you've learned or something somebody should know?
I would say the first thing is, unless some sort of fancy facade is just integral to who you are as a business or your image, don't go for that, because you're going to start generating so much overhead that it's going to condemn you to death, probably. I would say be realistic about what you need to start up. The biggest thing I would say is be realistic about what you personally need to keep your personal life afloat. Because a lot of people think they have this great business idea, and it is a great business idea, but the business won't actually generate a salary for them, and then that sounds romantic, and then it's not romantic when they run out of money.
The early condemned, the running out of money, it's not as
There's a theme running through it.
Yeah, very good. And Chris Beck, you've gone through some of those struggles in the down economy.
Sure.
When you're trying to get something like that started in a traditional workplace city like Charlotte, do people sort of say, good luck with that, let us know when you succeed, or is there sort of a welcoming encouragement?
It all depends on who you know, and Charlotte has a great community of people that we've seen recently that, I'm getting to know a lot of the people in this room through the efforts of Carlos and Philip and others like that, but until we started getting plugged in, there was a whole lot of crickets out there when you were, just talking about what you wanted to do. This is a big business town, and, big business being banks, government, healthcare, all that. We talked about all that last time. And for a small entrepreneur, a small 2-man team or whatever, you're trying to get started and you're trying to, attract clients and look professional and get a business rolling, it can be, a little intimidating to go out and find an office space and pay X amount of dollars to, sign a lease every month and sign away 3 years of your life when you don't know where your first, freelance check's going to come from.
Tyler Ford, you were in a corporate atmosphere before you started Lightbulb. What's that transition like? Did you learn some lessons there, or do you now know, hey, you don't have to be afraid of those guys just because they have the big company behind them? What's your experience with that?
My experience so far personally has been to love being out of that environment. The freedom that comes from being out of it. I mean, I enjoyed what I did for a long time, and I think for me personally, my journey, if you want to call it that, from going from that culture to more of the freedom of more of an entrepreneurial vibe, is right in line with kind of what's happening with business and people looking at non-traditional work environments, not just as far as where they work, but how they work. People looking at maybe hanging on to a freelance job longer than they would have in the past, instead of searching or running after the corporate. We deal with a lot of people in our space that are like that, who, like I said, had jobs before, and they're, maybe a year ago they looked at where they are now as, they were part of a downturn, or they were let go, or they were part of a layoff. And we've had folks who I know who've had job offers and have chosen now to stay in a freelance environment or in a startup environment, just because I think the safety and security of big business has been chipped away at a little bit, and people are maybe becoming a little more self-reliant. They're looking more to where they're going to risk, maybe put a little more of that risk on themselves than under big business.
I'd love to hear the rest of the panel, their thoughts on that. Are we in a transitional period, Chris Beck, where some of the fear of the recession is leaving and people are saying, hey, I kind of like some of the change I was forced into here?
Yeah, I think so, and the market's starting to open up a little bit. I've noticed, I've done some looking around on, job sites and freelance sites and, flex job sites, telecommuting sites, and there are a lot of people out there looking for good people. If you're good at what you do, if you have skills, if you have talent, you can get a job. And you know what? There are a lot of people offering very little on the rates. They're trying to use the economy as an excuse to offer you less. But you know what? Those of us who have done a lot and have a lot of experience can get a really good position or get a really good freelance contract or several contracts so that you can make your ends meet, not be so afraid of, maybe just the way things were a few months ago where it was really tough to get new business struck up.
Rich Deming, you have an energy company in the shadow of a huge energy company here in Charlotte. Can you tell us some about energy? And it sounds like you were almost going through that transition or maybe even pioneering it a little bit before a lot of folks. What's it like to be the little guy with a big corporation there?
I think at a certain point, and I didn't start Calor, I actually joined it as a partner. And I think it was a mental transition because when I was in a warehouse over here, it felt more like that's the boogeyman, that's the monster energy company over there. And then you kind of realize at the end of the day, Duke Energy is going to be here 100 years from now. So you can play ball with them, or you can refuse to, and it'll probably hurt your growth. So, I mean, at a certain point, you have to engage with the environment around you.
And maybe they have some responsibilities and requirements that you don't. Maybe it's not always so easy to be.
Well, and actually, as I've done more and more business with them, and I've met more and more people inside, you realize it's not Battlestar, the Death Star, or whatever. I mean, it's real people who have careers, and they have a lot of times they're hard in the right place, but they have certain confines they have to work with.
So the Darth Vader theme is not playing at all
Yeah,
times.
see, it's kind of easy to sit over in Noda and have a beer and think of, the Death Star or something. But really, when you start engaging with people and you realize that, that we're all going to have to work together to get where we need to get.
Carlos Espen, I'm going to suggest that you are not exactly the Duke Energy buttoned up corporate kind of landlord here. Is it refreshing to be able to have a place where there's paint on the floor, where people don't mind, they come into a situation and there is none of that sort of tension? Is that part of why you like to run this place?
No question. Having an accounting background, I like people to feel free to express themselves and take a chance and take a risk at trying something new. And community is, I think, one of the things we're talking about a little bit is even community at Duke Energy is different than community with 16 small businesses working together, networking for each other. But still community and working together. And I think businesses working with small businesses, that's a different way to do it. It's like a whale versus a small school of fish. They're all good. Whales are good, and small schools of fish are good.
And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because of your counseling background. Is there something that psychologically is healthy about the way the recession has sort of let the air out of the balloon a little bit for corporate America, for the economy, and we have to reconsider our roles and we have to sort of reconsider how we're living our lives? Is there a good side to that?
I'll tell you a secret, I think so. Yeah, because as a counselor, or a former counselor, I think, yeah, I saw a lot of bankers and a lot of people, and they're all great people, like you said, good hearts, but I think it's been nice for a lot of people to get a breath of fresh air, take a second look at perhaps maybe I can shift gears and maybe things a little bit differently, and I love the creative aspect of that, so I'd love to encourage people to take a second look at the way they're doing things and always get creative with it.
Tyler Ford, over at Lightbulb Co-working, you mentioned before the podcast that you're actually looking to maybe expand, that things have perked up some. Look into your crystal ball a little bit. I'm going to get all these guys to do that and look ahead to 2010 for your business, for the Charlotte economy. What do you see?
For our business, we just want to maximize the space that we have, give as many people an opportunity to get in there, and really work to develop kind of a creative hub there in South End. South End, a little bit different than NODA, doesn't have quite as much of this community vibe, a lot of what's going on here at Area 15 and things like that. It's a lot more of a professional environment over there, a lot of design and creative type things, but not nearly as free form and organic as it is here in the NODA area. So we're just looking to maximize things. You mentioned expanding. We've gone through kind of, I think, that transition a lot of startups do, where you start off wondering, how are we going to pay the rent, and is anyone going to come, and was this a good idea at all? And then before you know it, you find that you perhaps have done a few things well, and you're getting some momentum, and before you know it, you wish you had more space. So we don't have the ability in the long run to really grow outside of our four walls. We have our lease, so growing beyond that would be taking another big leap and trying to find some angel venture capitalist to fund another a big bite. But for the most part, we just want to really maximize what we're doing. I also have a design company that was kind of the impetus for needing to get an office, or I shouldn't say wanting to get an office, just to put a shingle out there and kind of have that fancy facade to a point. We just hopefully found a more cost-effective way to do it. And so it'll be nice for me personally to kind of, to a point, get to kind of just a steady point of momentum with the co-working venture, so that it's not as much of a distraction to a point, or sideways energy, because we kind of need to get back to work doing what we were doing before we started that.
Chris Beck, NetPhase, I know you folks are doing some interesting stuff about the future of Charlotte. Is that one of the things you're doing in 2010?
Yeah, I mean, the Charlotte 2.0 initiative, which we talked about last time, is something that we believe in, and we're trying to make sure that we take every opportunity to push the Charlotte tech business in as many different directions as we can. In addition to that, we've got some of our own startups going, some of our own products, and then we're partnering with current and former clients on other products. And just today we learned that we're going to be picking up another very large piece of business that's going to allow us to expand our capabilities and bring on some additional resources, which is the nature of what we talked about last time. And so does that roll into maybe NetPhase looking a lot more seriously at a space that we can use so that we can have a collaborative environment? Absolutely. Yeah.
And Charlotte 2.0 pushes the city government a little bit to encourage innovation more and help startups. And that's a website that you folks have worked on.
Yeah, well, I mean, our friend Josh Lipner kind of started that, and we love the idea, and just so happens it was very timely with something that was on Philip's heart as well. And Philip's a good buddy of ours, and so we had the opportunity to help promote that and to push that venture and see what else we can do to help Josh get that pushed in front of the politicians and everybody else. And yeah, it's a little self-serving. The more that we push the technology front in Charlotte, the better it is for the technology companies. That's just the way business is done, isn't it?
Yeah. And Rich Deming, you've launched some different things. You're now part of Calore. 2010, what do you see?
2010 is going to be a fantastic year. I really feel like we've turned a corner. I mean, if I was a coal miner or something, it might be, and I think if you're in traditional companies in the dying sort of industry, it's rough, and it's going to keep getting rougher and rougher. I think if you're in technology, if you're in clean tech, if you're in renewable energy, I think it's just going to keep getting better and better. I think a lot of the uncertainty in that industry is shaking out, and I think the future is bright.
Carlos Espin, Area 15, 2010, do you have new tenants coming in? Do you have new plans for this space?
Ultimately, I see it like it's a people job, just investing in people. Everyone, like I said, is unique. So different towns, different visions. We have James wants to start a coffee shop. We've got we're in talks with all sorts of different ideas, and yeah, it's about investing in people's dreams.
Mhm. And coffee shop you brought up, we talked earlier about some of the places around town. Caribou is like the airport in Charlotte. It's always packed with people. Is that a sort of a sign of the changing workspace, do you think, Tyler? What is it with the sort of unofficial co-working that seems to bring people together in shorter networking chunks than it did maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
I just know from my, sphere of people in the I guess the circle I run in, it sounds like I'm part of a gang.
What you call us,
As far as kind of the design community and people like that, I think for a long time it's almost like it's an acceptable way to work. It's okay to meet someone at Starbucks if you're doing design or even tech or IT or things like that. You roll into Starbucks or to Caribou and you open your Mac, and you're allowed to wear flip-flops too, because it's just non-traditional kind of across the board. And I think what we've started to see and what we've tried to help people, I guess, not aspire to, but provide the environment for, is to, even though that's accepted, and even though I can get away with wearing flip-flops and meeting every client at Starbucks, I think what we're starting to see is that people are starting to think a little bit bigger than that, and that they don't just have to stay within what the status quo of being a freelancer, or being a startup, or whatever, but because some of these non-traditional work environments are starting to come online and become more common, as far as co-working goes, there's a handful of great resource sites out there, and one of them somehow now I would say by mistake got an email feed coming from every single day, and there must be 4 or 5 or 6 co-working spaces opening up somewhere on the planet every day. And so I think as that keeps coming online, it's giving people who perhaps would have stayed in a bubble of just how much they could grow, or just the type of presence they could put out there, and now they're saying, oh, I can have my own office. I can bring a client to my office instead of meet me at Starbucks, or whatever it is. And I know for us, one of the benefits too, to doing the co-working venture is it's also helped our business on the design side by giving us a place to work, by bringing in some of those intangibles like the community, the collaboration, being able to pull another freelancer from the other side of the room and say, take a look at this new identity we did, what do you think, and vice versa. So I think that's been the biggest benefit we've seen, is to see a lot of people who maybe would have stayed under a glass ceiling of how much you can do as a freelancer or as a startup or as a small business, and now with some of these new opportunities, you can really get out there and have a place to plug in and really get to work.
So the freelancers may be getting a little more viable, maybe even a little less scruffy, and kind of getting in there for their piece of the pie. Chris Beck, the other side is happening some at a Social Fresh conference in the fall. All of a sudden there were 4 people there from Walmart. It was sort of like an Avatar when the bad guys infiltrate the nice space. Do you ever see that as a sort of little guy in that business scene, that sometimes there is an attempt to sort of cherry pick from the big corporations?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, are you talking about the big corporations cherry picking talent from the little guys, or are you talking about us trying to wheedle our way in there?
Well, more power to you if you can.
That's the part that's more interesting to me, is how to land the big fish, one bite at a time. But yeah, I mean, you hear more and more, especially in the social media space, the big companies coming in, trying to grab some talented young social media guy to lead their social marketing campaigns, because they realize, oh, wait, everybody else is doing it, but there must be a reason. It's promoting our brand, it's giving us new opportunities, which hopefully somewhere down the road translates to some dollars, right? So I think that, these little scruffy freelancers meeting in the co-working spaces are extremely viable, for larger corporations or anybody who wants to get somebody who's really plugged into the community. And one of the things I love about the concept of co-working space, or a place like Carlos has here, is, as a developer, you can meet in coffee shops, you can keep going there, but you're probably not gonna run into the same people all the time. Going to the places like this, you run into the same people, you get known in the same circles, so when a big company comes in and says, hey, who are the social media experts in Charlotte? Because, we need one over here at our office. You automatically have a list of names, that you can rattle off, and they can know that they're getting the ones who have a good reputation within the community. And sometimes it could lead to really nice freelance contracts or opportunities, or, sometimes they offer those people jobs.
Rich Timming, it sounds like we're talking to a certain extent about a culture clash, that maybe the recession has come along and sort of been a wedge between these big fortress, Duke Energy maybe, the Calor guys, between the little companies that are trying to fight for their share and the big companies who are going down. Let's make you the guerrilla leader. You're one of the good guys in Avatar. How can the little guys get in there and win that fight? Do they need, is part of it sort of gumption? Is part of it thinking, yeah, you can do that, it's a down economy? And
I guess I'd say first off, it's kind of the first rule of any guerrilla confrontation is don't go like head to head. I mean, do you use strategies that the bigger company can't sort of niche their way into? I mean, as an agile freelancer, you have the ability to do things because you don't have overhead. You don't have this sort of monster that you have to move. You don't have to turn the battleship on a dime. So I think the first thing is you develop strategies that the big company can't do.
Carlos Espin, you're a counselor. I'm a budding entrepreneur, but I'm worried. Talk me into getting in there and doing battle with these big companies. Tell me I can do it.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about your strengths, and try to get you to think in a non-adversarial way, non-hierarchical way. We're all in this community together, as born and raised in Charlotte. That's another way to look at it. We all live here now. We can work together. We all have strengths we can put together and see it as part of a team effort. We don't have to think hierarchically or adversarially and get you started at least that way. And begin to look at yourself that way. And then we'll teach you how to actually implement your life that way. So it's just thinking that way to actually have to behave that way. That's all it's about.
Chris Beck, you, as part of the Charlotte 2.0 effort, are taking on government, are challenging some of the powers that be in Charlotte. Is there some conflict here that needs to happen in order to make this more flexible kind of economy, more welcoming to the have-nots?
I don't know about a conflict. It's not like we're going to storm into the mayor's office and pick a fight. But at the same time, we definitely want to raise awareness that, there's a whole side of Charlotte that is, out there, and it's not working for a large institution. There are a lot of people working for themselves, especially now that the economy kind of tanked, and people are forced to look outside the box and say, maybe one job isn't going to be able to handle it anymore. Maybe I need to have 5 or 6 different freelance projects. Maybe, that's where, going on to a Flex Jobs, website and finding a bunch of telecommuting stuff from all around the country is just as safe, if not safer, than working for, one company. So they're going to have to recognize that and say, you're right. There are a whole bunch of people out there working for themselves, trying to, piece together something. But, ultimately, even the people working for themselves kind of want to grow. You don't necessarily want to become the big thing that you were, slain by. But at the same time, you don't ever want to stay small forever. You want to have the opportunity to grow and develop a business that can support your family and send your kids to college and maybe bring some of your best buddies to come work with you. And everybody makes some money.
Tyler Ford, I'm going to work tomorrow morning at Lightbulb Co-working. In what ways is it like going into a traditional office, and in what ways is it not? Walk us in the front door.
I think the number one thing that we get from people when they were first exploring it, people were first coming in to check things out, and now that people have been there, the number one benefit is the community and the collaboration and the sense that you are going to see the same 5 or 10 faces every day. I think we've all experienced, if we've ever lost a job or left a job, you always hear everybody say, well, I was glad to get out of there, but I'll miss the people. And even though we're all under our own umbrella, and everybody's an independent or their own freelancer or whatever it might be, at the same time, it sounds a little gooey, but you don't only have community, you actually have relationships where you start to know Joe across the aisle the same way you may have known someone that you used to spend 50 hours a week with at Corporation XYZ. So that's the biggest benefit, and that's what we've really, it's been exciting to see that happen, not only from a business standpoint as far as people reaching across the aisle, to, say, hey, you're SEO, I'm web design, can we get together? But also more on the community side of it. I don't know that I don't really see very many downsides to anything yet. Really not at all. I mean, it's a perfect environment. I really don't know that we have. It's actually one of the other big things that I know has happened from talking with everyone there. It's really also given a lot of people who maybe spend a little bit of time in a non-traditional job. Maybe they've been freelancing or working from home in a home office or something for a few years, that actually getting an office now has given them a new discipline that maybe they were glad to not have I know, for a long time, I was fortunate to always kind of be out as a field employee of the corporation I worked for. So I've never really had to punch in or punch out, but most people do. So at first you're glad to get rid of that and have the freedom to not have to be somewhere at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. But I've actually found now, even though I never had to do it before, it's been a great discipline to have to be at the office at 9, to open the door and start the coffee maker and just do some of the things I have to do now as a space manager. But it's been a great way for me too to get into some different work habits as a creative kind of person. My nature was to get the juices flowing at 9 o'clock at night, work till 2 in the morning, opposite the rest of the on-demand world and the 9 to 5 world. And so I've actually experienced it, and a lot of people in our space have. It's been great to actually have get out of bed, get somewhere, get to work, and kind of have that time quartered off the way you don't sometimes when you're just kind of working from home and Sports Center's right around the corner and the couch is calling your name or whatever it might be. So I think
So a little more self-starter in the new economy.
If I may, to speak to that, because I've worked from home for a number of years, and I have a perfect working environment. I use my RV as a home office, right off. But beyond that, it's isolated and it's quiet. Well, if you've noticed, I kind of talk a lot. I'm a very social person. There's a big downside to working by yourself all the time. Going in and having an environment where you can work with others and be a teammate, there's a lot to be said for that. And also, then you've got the boundaries issue. If you work on your own, work from home, when are you not at work? When do you call it a day? I mean, I know I've gone and started working at 7 o'clock in the morning because an idea was in my head. And, my wife's like pulling me away from the computer, late at night, saying, hey, come say hi to your family. I thought this working from home thing, I was supposed to see you more, not less.
So you have to be a self-starter and a self-stopper.
Yes, self-stopper, I like
Very
that.
good, and I guess that's one reason a lot of people think that Gen Xers and freelancers are like Twitter so much, because they can stay connected. But Rich Deming, I wanted to ask you about change. We have our first African-American president. It's a time of change in the country. Green energy is a big theme that seems to at least sort of symbolize some of that. Is that some of what's happening at Calora?
Well, that's everything that's happening at Calora. Everything we deal with is sustainability and renewable energy. But that encompasses a huge variety of things. It's not, I like hands-on projects where you increase energy efficiency or you put some solar panels in, but it's also culture change within corporations. It's also rebranding and repositioning companies. It's workforce development. It's an incredibly wide variety of, it's a huge scope.
What's a career that we might not imagine that is part of green energy that's coming out of it? Something that is not just sort of retrofitting or figuring out the thermostat or looking at a hybrid car. Is there something that is just would surprise us?
In any role that you can think of, there are specialties now in sustainability. For instance, in accounting, the financial models to put in a renewable energy project are just mind-bogglingly deep and complex. So in accounting, there's a huge area for sustainability, and in advertising, because you have to reposition brands if you're going to make them more sustainable, or in engineering if you're going to certify that they really are more sustainable and it's not greenwashing. So essentially, any occupation you can think of, there is a green component that's going to be evolving.
Carlos Espen, let's talk about this neighborhood, talking about change. We're close to NODA, along with South End and some other places. These are areas that seem to be gaining power in Charlotte, that seem to be gaining some energy. The economy seems to be smiling on these places as opposed to the old power base of Charlotte, which was more toward South Park, very centered in Uptown. What's going on in this neighborhood? It seems like good stuff.
Yeah, actually raising Dilworth, and that was, Dilworth is given the brother now, not just part of it, 3 blocks away from here. And yeah, it's great to see people who had feel disempowered to be more empowered. That's what county's all about. So, and economically, housing, small business incubator like we had here, it's such a great thing to be a part of. So we were meeting for 2 years about sustainable housing, trying to think of ways of the containers out in the yard here, trying to help the neighborhood continue to be a leader, actually in novel things, to help the people here in our neighborhood feel like we have novel things to offer. And so, yeah, it's all part of it. It's really exciting. I love it.
Tyler Ford, let's talk some more about this sort of new breed of Charlotte worker. There was some fear about losing that big corporate job. Now, as Chris mentioned, there's some people who wouldn't want it back. Is there a power shift there? Are people who are able to plug into different opportunities with portfolio careers and maybe be a little bit more light on their feet and agile? Is there low-hanging fruit for those folks in Charlotte right now?
I think certainly. I'm very new to the design world as well. I just opened up Photoshop and Illustrator and everything else, 4 years ago maybe. Spent my whole corporate career in sales, marketing, store planning. So it was all merchandising. It was always very much on the creative side of things corporately, but not as hands-on as I am now. And even now, I hope to be more of the big picture guy down the road and dream it all up and then hire incredibly talented people to come in and do what I'm having to try to execute now. But I think what we've found is that if you do good work, there's plenty of fruit out there. You would think that we're a small company, we don't do any big self-promotion, certainly not advertising, and sometimes we actually get a little scared that we haven't even tried and we're really, really busy. We haven't been able to put a portfolio site together. If you go to our website, there's nothing there that really shows what we do, which is really sad because we make websites. So for us, we say, as long as we keep doing good work, there's more than enough opportunity out there. In this type of environment, too, I think what we've seen is that, particularly here in Charlotte, there are so many startups. It's becoming so much of a startup community. We've dealt in this past 6 months with a handful of small financial firms, which was kind of word of mouth referrals from a larger financial firm that we've done some marketing and web work for. And so with the downturn in the banking economy here, with so many people striking out on their own to do that, that's kind of another little cottage industry that grew out of the big banks here that is, kind of low-hanging fruit. They don't need the huge, enormous, incorporated web design company. They need the small entrepreneur who can get them online, but looking like $1 million, but at a different level of cost, different level of I don't want to say expertise because we're experts, but it's, when you say low-hanging fruit, there's a lot of that out there, and we've just found that if you do really good work, subcontract, we try to sub out as much as we can. We try to keep as much in-house because that's more in our pocket, but we'd rather do really, really good work and build for the future, and as much as we can sub that out, not bring employees in, not bring the headaches of employees and everything that comes with that. So we found that there's plenty of work out there, and we're actually kind of anxious to get a website done, start doing some self-promotion, and then who knows, sky's the limit.
Chris Beck, is there too much low-hanging fruit? You talked about having to be a self-stopper. When you're the boss and you're in charge and you see these opportunities, is it a temptation to just put your head down, grab everything you can? Is that the kind of thing where you have to go, it's okay, if we're the company, we're going to be here tomorrow too?
Or you just raise your rates. You want to avoid taking a lot of low-hanging fruit, raise your rates. Low-hanging fruit can't afford you. But then the work that you do, you can justify your quality. You can justify the rate with your quality. NetPhase, we're not the cheapest in town. We're really good at what we do. And so we leverage that. So because we don't have, 75 hours a day to do work, we make sure that the work that we do is interesting not only to us, but can provide, something really solid for somebody who can absolutely afford it. And we just make sure that every single time we do a project, we knock it out of the park. So that they say, you know what, these guys, They cost us some money, but I don't have to have it redone in 3 months. It's doing exactly what we want it to. And in the end, they delivered it, 6 weeks faster than the other guys. So, they end up, enjoying the product a whole lot more. And then we can go home and actually see our families at some point in the day.
Rich Timming, has that been your experience? Do the clients who complain the least pay the most? And can you sort of situate yourself as a player in that game and demand a marketable rate?
I would say yes and no to that. I would say, unfortunately, some clients I've had that are paying nothing complain the most. I mean, there's a lot. One thing I've noticed, particularly if you're in a new industry, is it's a wonderful thing is no business model has been established. But it's also a terrible thing. And so trying to figure out what the model is that pays the rent and pays you a decent salary, and at the same time has some sort of fair pricing structure is difficult. And I think that's really where I know so many people in the renewable energy business that are just sitting around trying to figure out the model, because the model is difficult. But when you have a new model, nobody walks into a lawyer's office and has an expectations that they would speak to you, that they would speak to that attorney for free. They know that's how the attorney makes a living and the rent gets paid. In the renewable energy industry, we finally had to stop taking meetings with people that we didn't know that well, because everybody has an expectation that they could call you, you will sit down with them for an hour, and then another hour, and another hour, explaining the industry to them with no expectation that they would ever pay you anything. So you've got to develop a sort of sense of what this new environment feels like.
So Carlos, let's bring a counselor into that scenario. Rich is talking about a new industry. We're talking about striking out on your own, new workplaces. When everything is new and you're in a new career and it's a new decade, what does that do to the psyche of a worker, and what does somebody need to keep in mind in that real time of transition?
Again, it depends on the individual. We're talking about creative individuals who are trying to get to think different than they have in the past. And so in some ways that's very good for things to be in transition. It's a great opportunity in your life. So if you look at it that way, then it can be exciting. But it can also scare you. It depends, all of what's going on in your life. So that's a big part of it. So that's what I like about being a small business incubator. I'm not necessarily here to get small businesses to become tremendously big businesses. I love working with small businesses. There's nothing wrong with being a small business. Low-hanging fruit tastes as good as the other fruit. I'm more like that, about that.
Is there a character type that is a little bit more sanguine and poised during these times? Is it all about being light on your feet? What have you fellows found as far as riding the waves what's the best sort of personal approach to keep in mind?
You want me to take that? Oh, well, really, you've got to have a lot of confidence in yourself and your ability. It is what it is, because you're not going to find that next big contract every single morning. You're not going to find the right client every single day. You just have to know that, you keep putting your name out there, you keep talking to people, going out to places, meeting people, getting plugged into other communities, and, through word of mouth, you just got to trust and have faith that you'll get enough to get by until things get better. But, what also you hope for is that you do the right projects and talk to the right people, and then when somebody needs something, hey, I know so-and-so, they do really good stuff, I met them, and I've seen their work, give them a call, because, people is, it's the best way to get new business and to get business that you want to have is through people. You can blast and broadcast market all that you want to, but, people are immune to interruption marketing now. Really, word of mouth, Twitter, social media, those things carry weight because you get a chance to know these people on some level and you trust them a little bit more, so their opinion on who to use for, web design or graphic design, or, what office spaces are cool, or, why you should go with, renewable, sustainable energy carries a lot more weight.
Tyler Ford, can that be a danger? Are we sort of half connected at all times? You have a different kind of workplace over there. Is there a different sort of loose ties sociology that's going on here, since you're not necessarily in the big paternal workforce, since it doesn't necessarily look the way it used to? We're sort of connected in a lot of ways.
I know for me, I'm usually late to things like Twitter or what have you. Not so much anymore, because my sphere of of people now is a little more, neck deep in that. I had a Twitter account, I think, for a year before I tweeted. Of course, now it's vital. So I think I've almost seen with my friends or people that I work alongside or work with, already, maybe after a year or maybe 2 years that we've all been tweeting, almost a little bit of a backlash to wanting to have a conversation or wanting to talk. And not that it's slowing down by any means, but I think people that have been in it, perhaps the early adopters who jumped on real early, after a while, it's like, what's next? We're down to 140 characters. How much more, how much smaller can we get? I think we've seen people in our office really, after being in a home office for a year or a few years, or coming from wherever they came from, most everyone in our office was either in a home office or freelancing for the foreseeable past. So they really have been clamoring and really have appreciated being back in a community type environment, being able to connect with people. I think one other thing to dovetail off what Chris was saying, as far as the getting out there and doing things the right way and building a business on that front, we have kind of a mantra that we 100% use with the co-working space, and of course we also try to use it in the design business as well, is we wanted to make Lightbulb co-working a dream come true for them, not for me. So, and it boils down into the big picture, but also into little things. So we could price, a $75 membership at $100 and try to squeeze every little last dollar. And the same thing on the design side. Try to eke that quote up just this much, because you're looking at, what you find out over the long run is you're looking at kind of small potatoes, or whether it's providing something, amenities in the office. Do we buy them the $200 chair instead of the $100 chair? Those kind of things. And we found that if we kind of stick to that, make whatever we're doing a dream come true for the client or for the member or whoever, so that when you do great work, you're right there. It's word of mouth. It's you don't have to market so much anymore. It's fan-based marketing. I'm a Seth Godin nut. And so you talk about interruption marketing and how it's over.
Right.
We try now to market to our fans, who can be our best vehicle to get the word out even further.
Rich Deming, there has been sort of a atmosphere of pathos, especially in Charlotte, 12% unemployment for a while, a lot of jobs lost. Underneath that sort of drama and some of the sadness there, is there a different sort of business climate that we've been talking about here, of opportunity, of change, maybe a little bit more upbeat? Have we been focusing on the negative too much?
Yeah, I think it's like Rahm Emanuel said, don't waste a crisis. I think this crisis has been fantastic in ways. I think it leveled the playing field. I think for many years there in this neighborhood, it seemed like there were a lot of folks, kind of cheesy, half-crooked appraisers and real estate agents and property flippers who were making a fortune off of air. And I think wiping all of that clean and letting some of those overinflated properties go to foreclosure and letting some sanity get into the marketplace was an excellent thing. I think it allows people that actually have good ideas rather than inflated values have a chance to create a model that works.
So Carlos Espin, you were a little bit of an urban explorer and planting a flag here, Davidson and 15th Street for Area 15. How do you sort of decide, we're going to do it here, we're going to make it work? Just because nobody's here right now doesn't mean it can.
Well, I think one of the things I try to just keep things in perspective. There's a website that I saw a while back, globalrichlist.com. And you go to that site and you enter in your salary. And you put in, let's say, $20,000 a year. Okay, and you find out that if you make that much, you're the top 10% richest people in the world. So you got to think about that. Go, wow. In my neighborhood, that's probably about the average salary. So I'm dealing with the top 10% richest people in the world. If you make over $45,000, you're the top 1% richest people in the world. It's that sort of perspective, I think, that really can bring to bear some good strategies for keeping things in perspective again, be thankful for what we have sort of thing.
We have probably time to hear from each one of the panelists a little bit on your thoughts on this topic, as far as sort of the most important thing that somebody who is struggling, somebody who is going through this transition can keep in mind. And it really has been sort of a little bit of a search for meaning for a lot of people. So, Tyler, why don't we start with you and whether it relates to sort of the approach of light bulb co-working, but your brother has been unemployed for the past 6 months. You have all these tools. What do you tell him as far as what's ahead?
I think there's two ways to look at it, and I think we've all had, a lot of opportunity over the past year or so where we've probably all had lots of conversations with friends or family or just acquaintances who are either going through some of these changes or have gone or are dealing with these questions. And I think over the past year or so, I've kind of come to see it two different ways through a lot of these conversations. One is if you're going to strike out on your own, there's a lot going for you. It's just statistics, just facts, just nuts and bolts. We've all seen the crazy high percentages of Fortune 500 companies that were started during recessions. Basically every startup of some kind, the percentages are crazy. They were all started during recessions because incredibly talented or innovative or risk-taking people got maybe a little kick in the tail and stepped out and took advantage of the opportunity and made things happen. I think I've seen the other side too with some friends and particularly some family where sometimes there's some realism. Like I think we get caught in a good way talking about entrepreneurialism and startups and striking out on your own. And I think I've also started to see, after a lot of years of management and dealing with a lot of different people, there's also a mold for someone who should punch in and out for someone. And I think sometimes there's a value in knowing which one of those you are. If anyone who's, the E-Myth, if everyone's gone through that book and figured out, are you the entrepreneur or are you the technician? Will you be wildly successful being the business owner, which means you might not get to go do what you were good at before because you'll be busy running the business? Or do you need to be the incredibly talented technician who works for XYZ but does a phenomenal job, climbs the ladder, that kind of thing? Of course, there's compromises that come with both. There's ceilings probably that people would say come with not striking out on your own, but maybe that balances with the risk of doing it, that kind of thing. I think, first of all, is knowing what you do, knowing what you are, owning which one of those that you are, and then making the most of that opportunity. Do great work under somebody's umbrella. Do great work under your own umbrella and kind of going after it like that.
Very good. Chris Beck, closing thoughts on what people need during this transition to sort of move forward.
I think, just a little bit of creativity in what you can do. A lot of people, if they lose their job, and I've been through this, you think, oh my gosh, I've got to go and get another job. Well, maybe that's not necessarily in the cards for you right now because the industry you were in is really down and no one's hiring, they're letting everybody go. But then again, you might not have that killer one business idea or application that you can get off the ground, quickly enough to actually make money to, feed your family. So be willing to think outside the box and, maybe stringing together a couple of different opportunities to get yourself the ability to continue to feed your family, to not lose your house, to do the things that, maybe one of those things is some life goal or dream or something that you want to try that maybe you can't do full time just yet. But, you can do it a little bit and supplement with something else to keep the food on your plate and, keep your family fed while you start to transition away, and then maybe, when the economy picks back up, either a really nice opportunity opens up in that space of the things that you always wanted to do.
Rich Deming, final thoughts on sort of this economy, the transition that's going on, what you would tell someone?
I guess I would tell people that now is the time to do it. I mean, this period right now, starting about a year and a half ago and probably lasting, I don't know, it's another 2 years or it's another 5 years, is one of those sort of historical periods where crazy things can happen, which sometimes hasn't turned, there's the .com boom, which turned out bad for many people, but also turned out great for many people. And I think we're in one of those times right now. And I don't know, like 10 years from now, we might look back and go, wow, that was pretty amazing.
There is a lot of innovation that comes out of these downtimes. Carlos Espin, final thoughts on this time period, this economy, and this kind of wonderful space that you have?
I think it's about developing relationships. People work on, it's hard work, just like anything else. You develop your intellect, you develop your social skills, develop your emotional, spiritual life, whatever, and it takes work. And if you develop your relationship you have with yourself and with other people and learn about emotional development, learn about social development, take a look at those things. There's things to read, it's easy to learn. about it, and then implementation, relationship development, I think is the key right now.
And that brings us to the end of our discussion on the new workforce, the new workplace, and the new Charlotte. I'd like to thank the members of our panel, Carlos Espin, one of the owners of Area 15, Rich Deming of Color Energy, Chris Beck of NetPhase, and Tyler Ford of Lightbulb Co-working. I'm Jeff Elder. If you have thoughts on this podcast, we'd love to hear from you. We'd like to have you here in Area 15 next month in the audience, or maybe up here on the panel. Thanks for watching.